Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime. Liverpool playing yet another Premier League match. They've only just come out the other side of a 3-1 win against Burnley at Turf Moor, but already we're looking ahead to another game. This time it is Bournemouth again away from home on Saturday at the dreaded kick-off time of 12:30. And of course, with Liverpool only having just played on Wednesday night, the Saturday 12:30 is potentially even more evil this time than all the other times we've got it, and it always feels like we get it away from home. I don't know, I'm not going to go into any sort of conspiracy or anything, but it is incredibly annoying, especially like I said, after an away game on a Wednesday night. They haven't even had a full 72 hours to recover, and already the team are going to be back on the road looking for another 3 points in the Premier League. And I think because of that kickoff time and because of how congested the fixture list is at the moment, it is turning what would, in my eyes, being quite a predictable game in terms of both how Liverpool and Bournemouth would have played into something that I think has become incredibly interesting, because I'll come on to more about how Bournemouth are going to play later, but I think it's really, really difficult to call how this game's going to go, to say whether Bournemouth will do well, whether they'll get a foothold in the game, or whether Liverpool will steamroller them. I'll be perfectly honest, I'm just not entirely sure, but I will be doing my best throughout this video, as I always do, to try and give you guys an idea of how I think the game will eventually pan out. And of course, the other incredibly interesting thing about this weekend is the fact that Manchester City, not only are they playing after Liverpool, which means we've got the chance to put the pressure on there by going above them, at least temporarily, should we get the 3 points, because we go up to, 42, and they're on 41 at the moment. But the game they have got is on Saturday evening at 5:30 against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. So if there was ever a better opportunity for Liverpool to leapfrog Manchester City and absolutely pile pressure on them, I haven't seen it yet. This is a huge chance for Liverpool to try and gain some ground in the title race and potentially, and I say it every week, but just possibly finish the weekend top of the league above Manchester City. How fantastic would that be as the fixture list starts to pile up and we come closer and closer to Christmas and of course the halfway stage. So team news going into the game. Of course, the one thing that will be occupying all Liverpool fans' minds going into this game is the fact that Joe Gomez picked up a pretty nasty knock in the game against Burnley, and it's looking like he's going to be out, according to the club website, for somewhere around 6 weeks. They haven't said this for certain. They've said it all depends on his rehabilitation process, whether that means it could be longer than 6 weeks, whether that means it could be shorter than 6 weeks and we could see him back within a month. It is absolutely impossible to tell at the moment, but hopefully we see him make a speedy recovery. It's incredibly annoying that it is at this point in the season, where the fixtures do pile up so intensely and we need to rotate in the defence more than ever, that this is the time where Joe Gomez picks up an injury. But you know, that is, you win the Premier League title based on how you respond to those kind of situations. So it's really going to be interesting to see how Liverpool handle not just this game but the rest of the festive period and all the massive games we have coming up, given that we have lost such a key member of our defence. But Joe Gomez will of course not be available for this weekend. However, many players will be a lot fresher than I think we will have been expecting them to, because of the sheer amount of rotation that took place against Burnley. I think it was certainly interesting. The club put out some training photos today from the sessions that have been going on today, and essentially all the players that have been training today or have at least been part of the main group that were training today did not start the game against Burnley last night. And you've got players like Salah and Firmino came on as well. You've got Lallana and Fabinho, a few fringe players like Rafa Camacho and Curtis Jones as well, but no sight of any of the players who actually started that game against Burnley. So I think that's a sign that Jurgen Klopp will be prioritising getting those players that didn't start against Burnley on the pitch, and then it'll be much more about late fitness assessments that happen tomorrow to decide whether the players who did start at Turf Moor will be available to start this game as well. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up with the starting 11, I think of course it has to be Alisson Becker in goal. And then the centre-back pairing, this is of course a very, very interesting one because of the sheer number of players that we don't really have available in the defence. I think certainly compared to what we've got in the midfield and the front line, we haven't been able to rotate as much. So there are players who played at Turf Moor, who've played in all the games before that, who are just going to have to power through this weekend. And one of those is, I think, going to be Virgil van Dijk. I think you've got the possibility of maybe playing a Matip Lovren partnership and giving Van Dijk the day off so that he's fully fresh for those games against Napoli and Manchester United. But I just think without Gomez, Van Dijk is going to be so important throughout this period, and we're almost just going to have to risk a little bit of fatigue in him and play him for most of these games. So I think if we go with Lovren at centre-back, which I think we're going to do for this game, because, you know, Matip played at Turf Moor, and given how few games he's played, I think to ask him to play 2 sets of 90 minutes in such a short space of time would be madness. And then that means you've got to have Van Dijk, and hopefully, you know, he doesn't pick up any injuries or knocks or anything like that. And then at right back, I think it's going to be Trent Alexander-Arnold. He played most of the game against Burnley. However, he didn't start, of course. And so it is maybe a little bit of a risk to play him, especially with him being so young. You don't want to burn him out at this early stage in his career. But I certainly think if we are going to bring Nathaniel Clyne in at any point, this is not the game to do it, because Clyne is, of course, primarily a defensive right back. He doesn't really have that much about him going forward. So I think there are games coming up against teams like Napoli where we might look to sit back and defend a little bit more. This is one where we want our fullbacks to be bombing on and creating chances. So I think that Trent Alexander-Arnold will play at right back, and then at left back, I think it's going to be Andrew Robertson. I think this is another game where you could probably get away with Moreno playing, especially because he only played around about an hour against Burnley. I think part of that is because he was burnt out after not playing many games recently, so maybe he won't be able to recover in time for this match. And Robertson has been seen in those training photos as well, so I think Jurgen Klopp is likely to want to rely on him. But if you do want to give Robertson a little bit of a rest, then maybe I think you could throw Moreno into this game, but because of how the situation panned out at Turf Moor, I think Robertson will start at left back. And then the midfield, this is where it gets pretty interesting, and I say that in every video because it's always where we start to have more and more questions about exactly how Liverpool are going to line up. I think ideally we'd want to play the 4-2-3-1 in this game because that's worked so well recently, and the 4-3-3 on the other hand hasn't really been that effective at all. But I think given the players we have available and the players Jurgen Klopp will want to put into this side, I can see him potentially switching it to the 4-3-3 with a view to having one midfield player that will stray forward and help to take part in the attack as well. So I think Wijnaldum and Fabinho are absolutely nailed on to start. Neither of them played at Turf Moor, and both of them have been absolutely fantastic so far this season, especially as a midfield partnership. So I think they definitely start this game. And then the other member of the midfield three, I'm tempted to say that it's potentially going to be Naby Keita, because he had such a fantastic game at Turf Moor, and while he is one of those players who played the full 90 minutes, having not played many games before that, so you could maybe argue that he does need a little bit of a rest. I think after his fantastic performance against Burnley, Jurgen Klopp will be hard-pressed to not keep him in the side and see what he's got to offer in yet another Premier League away game. So I think Naby Keita might start, but if he doesn't, then I think Daniel Sturridge could start in his place. And that's why I'm torn between the two, because both of those played the full 90 against Burnley, but both of those had really good games. And I think it does come down to exactly how Jurgen Klopp wants to set his team up. If he wants to go for the 4-3-3 with a midfielder like Keita, who roams forward and joins in the action with the front three, then I think Naby Keita will play in this game. If he prefers the 4-2-3-1 and thinks that Naby Keita maybe isn't quite ready, then I think he will go with Daniel Sturridge. I think Sturridge will play on the right-hand side of the three. Then Firmino would play in the middle, Mane on the left, and then Salah down the middle. But if he doesn't do that, if he goes with Keita, then it's the old school front three that will start. It will be Salah on the right, Mane on the left, back in after that foot injury he had. I think he'll probably be all right. I mean, we haven't really heard any word on it, so it's entirely possible that he won't be available. And if that does happen, then I think we probably go for the 4-3-3 with Sturridge down the middle and Firmino pushed out to the left wing to kind of compensate for the lack of Mane. But should Mane be available, I think we do go with that old school front three, having had all of them rested and none of them play more than half an hour in the midweek game against Burnley. So taking a look at Bournemouth then, I think this game for them is actually a really, really big test of how they're going to do during this Christmas period, and a huge test of their squad depth, because it's the first time their fixture list has started to really become congested, and the first time it's been full of fixtures that they all really want to win. You know, that Huddersfield game at home on, I think it was Tuesday night for them, and that is of course crucial that they had the extra day of rest that Liverpool didn't have, and that could potentially play into their team selection as well. But they've all been games that Bournemouth have needed to win, and obviously they did get the win on Tuesday night, but they did so using mostly first team players. They couldn't afford to rotate to anywhere near the degree that Liverpool did during their midweek match. And also with Lewis Cook being quite sadly injured, and I say sadly because it's 6 to 9 months that he's going to be out, and he was doing so well for Bournemouth and was a key player in a side that I think all of us really enjoyed watching. So he is going to be out for like 6 to 9 months. He picked up an injury on Tuesday night, and that does mean that they are going to have a bit of a selection headache there, because with him not available, it's going to be interesting to see how they set up, because he is of course such a crucial player to the way they play. And I think with the fact that they might rotate as well, they potentially risk sacrificing any sort of rhythm going into this game. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Bournemouth set up. There's also the suggestion that they might play a back five as well, because that's what they did at the Etihad. So you kind of think that that's maybe how they want to set up against the big teams. But of course, with this being at home, they might have a slightly different approach. I certainly don't think they're going to park the bus. I don't think they're going to put 10 men behind the ball and absolutely pack the box or anything like that. But I do think they might look to sit off Liverpool a bit and then attempt to hit us where it hurts on the counter-attack. But I think with that back five, they've certainly been guilty of some static defending recently, and their results of late haven't quite been as good as they were earlier on in the season. I think in terms of the way they defend, they're often caught out with simple balls into the box. You only have to look at that game against Huddersfield, who aren't enjoying the best form of late, and even David Wagner after that game said he didn't think Huddersfield deserved to get anything out of that game. They had something like 23 shots during that match, and their expected goal stat wasn't that bad either. So it wasn't that they were just having pot shots. They were creating decent quality chances, and quite often they were just sending the ball into the box with crosses and stuff like that, and finding space that Bournemouth just weren't closing down. And I think some of that is down to fatigue. It's down to an inability to sort of raise your game for every single match around this time of year. And, you know, we have seen Bournemouth do it against Liverpool at this time of year at the Vitality Stadium in the past. That 4-3 defeat is, of course, all on our minds, so we certainly can't take them for granted, and they will obviously have plenty of attacking players who've got huge amounts of talent. I think the interesting thing about the way they played against Man City was when they did have the ball, they didn't show too much haste in terms of getting forward. They didn't panic and try and just go long, go for route one, try and find Callum Wilson as quickly as possible. They actually play the ball around a bit. They relish the possession. They probe a defence, and they try and wait for the breakthrough. And that tends to actually work for them. It's how they got their goal at the Etihad. So I think Liverpool certainly do have to be careful. And I think an important thing is just to make sure that they don't get too much of a foothold in the game. So we have to really take advantage. It sounds evil, but take advantage of the fact that Lewis Cook isn't available for them. Take advantage of the fact that their midfield will be ever so slightly imbalanced and out of tune because of that, because they're missing such a crucial player, and just try and make sure that Bournemouth never really have any sustained spells of possession, because of course, with it being at home, with it being in that small, tightly packed ground, if the fans start to smell that Bournemouth are doing well, they will start to kind of G the team up. They'll create the kind of atmosphere where Bournemouth start to feel like they can do something. And as I said, they've done it against Liverpool in the past. We don't want to give them the idea that they could do it again. But of course, with all those factors, with the fact that they have got great players, but they have got injury problems, and they have got issues with squad depth, and a slight question about how they're actually going to set up for this game, it's so difficult to actually know what kind of Bournemouth is going to show up. And I think that's what makes this game so interesting, because you also get that with Liverpool in the 12:30s. Sometimes we show up and we're absolutely fine in these kind of games, and sometimes we show up to a Saturday 12:30 and we just look like a shadow of our proper selves. So it's going to be a really interesting game, and I don't think any of us will really know how it's going to go until we see the starting 11s and until we watch the first 15 minutes of the game and get an idea of who's going to be on top, who's going to dominate possession, and who's going to create the most chances. But it's certainly one to look forward to. I think with the fact that Bournemouth don't sit back, and with it of course being on their home ground, I think it will be a fantastic game either way, and hopefully one that Liverpool come out the other end with 3 points and heap the pressure on Man City ahead of their massive game on Saturday evening. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, as always, hit that like button down there, hit the subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out all the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Sunday, I'm afraid, because, you know, I'm going to miss the game for the post-match content after the game against Bournemouth. Until then, bye for now.